All right, g'day and good morning, IB Psychology students. The time here is 5:51 a.m. And like I like to do every morning at 5:51 a.m. is write essays for IB Psychology. I'm working on some example essays for the cognitive approach, and I've just written one evaluating schema theory, and I thought, well, why not just hit record here, and if you want, I can explain how I go through the process of writing an essay. And I figure this will be, one, intensely boring for you, but it could be really relevant and useful. All right, and so because there's a lot of thought processes and a lot of things that go into this, and I can't always articulate them, in these comment sections over here. All right, so the essay I'm going to try to write now is discuss one model of thinking and decision making. All right, so I'm going to write about the dual processing model. Now, if you know a lot of my work by now, I'm not a big fan of the command terms. Discuss and evaluate mean the same thing. Anytime you're writing an essay about a theory in IB psychology, you can use the deal structure. So D equals describe the theory, E equals the evidence, A equals the applications, and L equals the limitations. Now, I like this general framework, but I might find that in the course of writing this essay, I might break it. I might do something different. I might throw a limitation in there before the evidence. Who knows? I did that in the last schema theory essay. All right, okay, anyway, so now how do I begin my introduction? So I'm going to discuss one model of thinking and decision making. I always like to simply restate the question. One model of thinking and decision making is the dual processing model. The reason I like to restate the question is I should be guaranteed 1 mark already. If I just submitted this, if I just slept for the other 59 minutes of my exam, I should get 1 mark for criterion A, because in the guide it specifically says that you can students can identify the problem by restating the question, and in the rubric, identify the problem gives you 1 mark. All right, so 1 sentence, 1 mark, boom, done. All right, now you don't have to remember names of researchers, but it is good to remember names of theorists. So I think you should know that one model of thinking and decision making is a dual processing model. This model is often credited to Kahneman and Tversky, right? Now, pretty famous names. I would hope a good essay would remember this. Now, when I'm writing these essays, I'm not trying to write them from my perspective. I've spent over a decade studying psychology and writing textbooks and making videos. So I've had 10 years to prepare for this essay, longer than that, 15 years to prepare for this essay. You guys have had 12 months, 18 months. So I try to write content that would be realistic for a high school student to remember. Okay. But I also try to just put, it's pretty hard to get top marks, so I might throw something in like this new fact that, to be honest, I just read recently and learned just recently, but I'm going to put it in my next edition of this textbook, which is the idea of the dual processing model dates back to William James in the 1890s. So, however, this idea of two systems of thinking dates back to William James in the 1890s. Now, if you don't know the name William James, it's because we don't focus on the history of psychology in IB psychology, but he is considered the father of American psychology. If you know the English author Henry James, I think they were brothers. This is going to take me a long time, isn't it, to make this video? Anyway, it's okay. All right, I'll keep going. All right. Now, in my introduction, I want to restate the question, the name, and here it's a theory, so I'm going to give the name of the theorist. Now, I want to talk about the studies. I'm going to briefly outline I kind of want to have a thesis, right? So I'm going to briefly outline what the theory is about and the studies. But because it's a discuss, I need to have a balanced review. I'm going to also mention the limitations. Okay, so all right, so my introduction here. Now, to be honest with you, I actually don't know what the limitations of the model are that I'm going to talk about right now. And that's kind of why I wanted to make this video on this topic. I'm really testing myself here. It's been a while since I've taught the dual processing model, so we'll just see what I come up with. And realistically, that's what should happen in an exam. Your critical thinking would hopefully, you'd be able to just come up with it on the fly. You have all the knowledge, and then you can reflect on that knowledge and say, well, hang on, but. Okay, now that's my opening paragraph. Remember, I don't want to tell students just what to do in their essays, right? So I can tell you, do that. But I want you to understand why you're doing it. And so now, let's look at the introduction. State the theory, state the studies, introduce like your counter arguments. Why? Well, remember the purpose of an introduction is to provide context for your whole essay. So try not to think of writing essays as a checklist, but try to put yourself in your reader's perspective. And it's really hard to do, especially as your prefrontal cortices are still developing, and that idea of perspective taking, be able to see the world from someone else's perspective, is a function of the prefrontal cortex. But do try to think. Your examiner has no idea what you're going to write about. They have no idea what's coming in your essay. And hopefully you know from schema theory that information is best comprehended if you first activate a schema. That's what introductions do. It's just one big schema activation. That's what a topic sentence in a paragraph does. You know that SEX, S-E-X paragraph structure you were taught, or P-E-E or P-E-E-L? Yeah, that's the what. That's the basic, okay, do that. But the why, it's all psychology. Okay, now, first of all, to discuss this model, I have to describe it. So let me it's hard to talk and to think at the same time. So let me just write a paragraph here summarizing the dual processing model. Now, the dual processing model is a double-edged sword in that it's very easy to describe, but it does make it harder to distinguish your answers from the rest. Everyone can remember System 1, System 2, fast and slow. So one way to distinguish your answers is to make sure you've got 4 or 5 adjectives for System 1 and 4 or 5 for System 2. That's going to allow you to have a more detailed summary than at least, I would say, half of the people, half of IB psychology students, okay, if you can have 4 or 5. You're going to have an advantage. So I've got this is my description of the theory. Okay, now the next thing, my evidence. Now, evidence is pretty much in the studies. I'm just thinking to myself, because this is a pretty limited paragraph, how do I show extra knowledge? And so that's why I'm going to talk about the anchoring effect. And because these are pretty easy to remember, there's lots of different interesting cognitive biases that demonstrate dual processing theory, dual processing models, fast and slow thinking. So here, because I want to show some more knowledge that I do know a bit more about the dual processing model, I'm going to talk about the anchoring effect. Okay, now this is great. This is actually, I hope you're finding this valuable. If you are, please leave a comment, because I like to be able to articulate what I'm doing here, and I can show you my thought processes. So I've talked about the anchoring effect, but I'm feeling now that, okay, this is sounding a little bit vague. I can describe it, but I'm thinking about, is my examiner, is my reader going to, of course my reader's going to know what I'm talking about, but will they know that I fully understand this anchoring effect? And so I want to have a specific example. So I was almost going to give an example I remembered from a video that I show in class about how they had a bottle of wine and ping pong balls, and they had to guess the value of the bottle of wine. But then I thought to myself, wait, why use a detail from a video when I could use a study? Now I remember the study that's really easy to remember, and that's going to help me demonstrate the anchoring effect, show my knowledge, and also the criterion C, use of research. I have to use studies in my answer. So I can now introduce my first study because it's going to do lots of things. It's going to demonstrate the system 1, system 2, and it's going to help me show and explain anchoring effect. So for example, now I quite like if the study is a classic, if it's really well known, saying in one classic study saying classic study is a good term to use if it is a classic study, because it shows you know the importance of that study. Loftus and Palmer's is a classic study. Bransford and Johnson is a classic study. Radke, Passamonte, some of those newer ones aren't classics yet, right? So anyway, in one classic study, now I'm going to talk about, it's the one that I remember, the Gandhi study. Now I have to make sure that I spell Gandhi right because I'm prone to getting it wrong. Okay. Did I spell it right? I hope I did. I hope you can read my these words on the, man, it'd be annoying if I'm going to record all this and you can't read the screen. I'm sure you will be able to. Okay. Now, I'm stalling here. One group were given a high anchor, one group were given a low anchor. Okay, because I want to show I know that it was a high and a low anchor, but I can't remember the specific years. I think it was like 140 and 7. So I'm going to guess, and I just hope, I'm going to have to hope I get it right. And when it comes to specific details like that, yep, it's best if you know, you want to get it accurate, you want to get it right. Now, if I get it wrong, am I going to lose marks? Well, not necessarily. You don't really lose marks, or you shouldn't really lose marks in IB psychology. You know, it's a judgment over your whole essay. So if I only have 3 facts in my essay and one of them is wrong, okay, yeah, well, that's not a good look. But if I have 20 facts here and I get this one thing wrong, well, that's not really going to make a big difference. So it's more of a judgment over the quality of your whole essay. So I'm going to take a guess. One group were given. If you did this for the study for your IA, you'll probably be laughing at me that I'm going to get this wrong. Again, this is why I want to make this video, to show you, right? Even though I write books on this stuff and make videos, there's a lot to remember for your exam. So one group given. Okay. Now, I get to another point. I can't remember the specific difference. I think it was about 60 and 57. I can't remember it being that different. But in this case, because the results are really important, of the study. The results are the most important part of the study. I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to guess the results. I'm not going to guess a specific number here. I've made a decision because in an examiner reading about dual processing model is probably going to be reading the study a lot. And so they'll probably know the specific answer, right? Because this study will probably appear in a lot of these essays. And I don't want to guess a wrong answer because I'm not even as remotely sure. Like this one, I think I might be right, maybe, but I can't guess the specific age that they guessed. But I just know higher or lower. Now that might affect my results. I would get a better score if I knew the specific answers. So anyway, that's why flashcards are a really useful thing to revise, because you can help revise these specific details. Okay, those in high group. Okay, now here's what I don't want to do. Most students will finish here and get into the next point they're going to make. So they finish with the results and then they just go on to saying another study. But before I move on to that next point, I need to explain this. I need to link it back to the dual processing model. I'm now having to think very carefully about how this relates to System 1 and System 2 thinking. And this is why this part of the answer is really key. How does, I'm showing my vulnerabilities here, aren't I? How does the anchoring bias link to System 1 thinking? System 1's fast. Okay, so if you have an anchor, the anchor number. Okay, now it is to do with heuristics, right? And so it's the idea that just to explain, I can probably explain it better verbally here than I can in writing, that the anchor is used as a heuristic, a mental shortcut, information that's readily available that aids in our judgment of something. Now I'm aware that I haven't explained that well in this paragraph, but it reminded me about heuristics. So now I'm going to just elaborate a bit more on heuristics, because that also demonstrates the dual processing model of decision making. I might have defined availability heuristic wrong here, but I think I've pretty much got the right idea. Now I'm realizing that I'm kind of getting away from the dual processing model, so I just want to bring it back to that topic. Heuristics are an example of System 1 thinking. Okay, all right. Now, what's my next point going to be? Okay, now I'm thinking, at this point, I've got one study. I feel like I've shown some knowledge here with the anchoring effect and heuristics, but I want to have a really good second study now. And here's one I found recently about the disfluency effect. And I might even link this to applications. So I'm going to get into my evidence and my application at the same time. Okay, so I want to have that DEAL structure. I've described the model theory, I've got the evidence, and you can see the evidence and applications here are kind of mixing up a little bit, which is perfectly fine. It's a logical structure, but I want to show I want to show another study here. So I'm going to introduce the study by talking about a disfluency effect, and this is another good bit of advice that I would give you to distinguish your answers from the rest. Is make a point first and a study second. Okay, because it's easier to link the study back to the point you're making. Right, so a lot of students, they just summarize studies and there's no indication of why is the study relevant. So I'm going to talk about a study that's relevant to the disfluency effect, and then hopefully in reading my writings, I'm not going to be able to talk and say something and write something different. Working memory is limited in that capacity. So hopefully you can read along and you'll be able to see where I'm going with this. All right. Now, I'm trying to remember the CRT, the answer here. I might be getting this wrong. I'm not a math guy, but it's along these lines. I would probably want to get this right. Anyway, okay, let me get back to reading the study here. Now, what's interesting with this limitation is, now I'm cheating a little bit here because I read this study a couple of days ago and it's sticking in my mind, and the limitation that we don't know if it was they changed their thinking style or if it made them read slower. Now, that was a limitation that the researchers themselves put in the original paper. They did 4 experiments in this series, and they tested this limitation in the other experiments, but I didn't have a chance to read those additional experiments, and so I'm not going. I could mention here they did other experiments that found that it wasn't the fact that it just made them go slower, but it did actually change their thinking style. But I think an examiner would want to hear what those studies were, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Okay, now coming back to the study that I've just described. Again, I got pretty lucky here in writing this. I remember some details. I remember they were from Princeton. I don't know why, I just remembered that. I remembered the name of the test, all because I'd read this in the last day or two. Now, do you know how to be successful in life? It takes 3 things. Success in anything, and success in your exams. You're going to need hard work, you're going to need some help, and you're going to need a bit of luck. And sometimes that's just what's going to happen on exam day. You're like, I just read this study this morning. The details are stuck in my mind. You get the right essay question and you just happen to read the right study. It's that could occur. So I'm a bit lucky in that I kind of forgot that I read about this study a couple of days ago, and now I'm doing it here. Okay. Now let me see. Did I finish writing this? In the disfluent conditions, fonts were hard to read. Okay, all right. The result. Now, just personally, I like to separate my methods. You'll see I never talk about the aim of the study. The aim of the study was, because often the aim that the researchers had is different to how we're going to use the study in our essays. So, and also the aim doesn't matter. It's the results that matter. So why do we bother describing the methods if it's just the results? Well, because if you don't have the methods, you can't understand the results. So, how much detail to put in the methods? Well, did I need to put they were Princeton? No, that's just me showing off. But you need to put enough detail in the methods so the results make sense, which brings me back to my little point here that I kind of need to get this right. So let me see if I did. There were 2 other ones, but they're a bit harder to remember. And now, this is a good strategy to use, right? Put a little asterisk. If for example, I started writing this and I realized, oh wait, there was a sentence I wanted to add in here, but I don't have space in my exam paper. Put an asterisk and then put this at the bottom of the page. or at the end of the essay. But be careful, you don't want to rely on that too much, right? 3 of those maximum, okay? You don't want to have them all the time, because otherwise it's very hard to read as an examiner, and it breaks up the flow of your essay. So that's why I'd also recommend doing some planning, like I probably should have done. Okay, can you help me out here? A bat and a ball costs $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. If the ball costs 10 cents, how much does the bat cost? So most people go, well, the bat costs $1. That would mean that the bat costs $1.10, right? So it costs $1.10, and 10 cents would be $1.20. So that can't be the right answer. So it was 5 if the ball costs. But the answer is like 5 cents, $1.05. If the bat ball costs 10 cents, isn't it like $1.05? No, because then that'd be $1.15. Is it 90 cents? $1 more. Oh man, okay, I can't get this. I'm sorry. I'll copy and paste the right one in the comments of the video. Oh, my brain's fried. Okay, I'd have to, like, I might put a little note here. Honestly, if I was writing this in an exam, I might put, I think I got this wrong, but it's the right idea. I did that once. If you're still watching it by this point, I'm going to bore you with a story from my university days. I studied 3 sections of my my Eastern European in the Soviet Union days exam. There were 3 sections. I only studied 2 of them, and the third I didn't study come up on the test. And I wrote the introductory paragraph, and I started to BS my way through it, and then I just wrote a pleading note to my professor saying, hey, look, I'm not going to waste your time because it's summer vacation, so I'm just going to end it here. But, you know, be generous. That was the only course I didn't get a B or an A on in my university. All right, anyway, sorry. Don't do that in your IB psychology exams, okay? Don't talk to us as examiners. Yeah, I would find if you're my student in my class, like you can make me chuckle, right? I might give you a chuckle point. Don't do it in your actual exams. Okay, where do we get to? So I've got 2 studies. I've described the second study. I think I'm pretty good. Now I think I'm ready to get into some limitations. Now, what is the limitation of the dual processing model? Well, it's pretty tricky, really. My brain is feeling a little bit fried, and honestly, this is reality. This is critical thinking is really difficult, and you know, how do you evaluate a theory that's so simple? Well, maybe it's too simple, because can all types of human thinking be simply categorized into 2 types? Where does thinking 1 end, and where does system 1 end, and where does thinking system 2 begin? I think I'm making some pretty good points here. Now, before I get straight into the limitations, I feel like it's just going to be a big jump, right? To go, I want to link my limitation to the point I've just made. So how am I going to do that? Okay, so okay, so this is just good essay writing, right? You want your ideas to flow logically from one to the next. So I've said we can see that there is some empirical support for the dual processing model. Okay, I'm just kind of restating what I've just said, but the theory is not without its limitations. 2 sentences there that link nicely into the point I'm going to make. Now, it's a valid idea, but poorly explained, I would say, what I'm talking about here. But to be honest with you, I mean, I think this is it's critical thinking that we'd expect of, like, we're trying to evaluate Shakespeare here. We're trying to evaluate this model. I mean, the guy won the Nobel Prize, right, for this theory. And so do you think this lowly little psychology teacher can come up and go, hey, yeah, but, and come up with a critique that no one else has thought of before? Preposterous. But anyway, I think it's a valid point, right? Of all the different ways that we can think and make decisions, do you really think it comes down to two systems? Okay. Now, I'm not going to put this one in here because this is very esoteric. I was about to say that another limitation is that Kahneman himself said that you wouldn't find differences in the brain based on system 1 and system 2, which actually contradicts another study that I could talk about, Becker et al. With the Iowa gambling task brain. I might talk about that one, but that's okay. But that was a Google talk that I watched that I wouldn't expect students to know about or remember. So I'm not going to put that in here. I think that would be unrealistic to expect people to know that. So what was the second point I made? The likelihood to all thinking fits into two categories. Now, I want to evaluate the model first before I get into evaluating the studies. So I'm just going to put a note here to come back to the studies. What was the second point I said? That the theory is not without its limitations. Can make decisions into two categories. So luckily that one. Sorry, talking and thinking and writing is overriding my working memory capacity. So maybe in post-production, I will just... Now, I promise I'm not going to go Google. Right, you see the editing, I'm not Googling, I'm just going to sit here and think, and maybe I'll just push fast forward so you can see it, that I haven't like pushed pause and gone and looked at my textbook to find the answer. Okay, now I've just thought of another idea here as I've been thinking, and I just want to reiterate that, and I feel like this is exactly why I wanted to make this video, to show you critical thinking is different to knowledge, okay, but it's based on your knowledge. So knowledge is the stuff you can remember. You can bring it to the forefront of your mind pretty simply, pretty readily. Critical thinking takes time and effort. And so some students might get annoyed that in my textbooks, I don't give you the answers to critical thinking, because then it just becomes a memory. But I give you the questions to try to prompt you to be able to think critically. Okay, so in my thinking here, I was thinking, does the model account for all examples of decision making? And then I realized, yeah, hang on, what if there was actually something important as a consequence to these decisions? Does the model account for all examples of decision making? For example, Okay, so I've made a couple of points here that I think are quite relevant. The first one here meaning these studies, there was no consequences, right? If you get the question about a bat and a ball wrong, nothing happens. You just get it wrong, right? So there's no motivation really to use your system two. But what if this was a real life situation? Now I talk about buying a house here just because this is something family members of mine are buying houses, and I've been thinking about the anchoring effect in, say, auctions and property. And do real estate agents use the anchoring effect? I know I would if I was a real estate agent. So this was in my availability heuristic, so I just used it here. Now, and then here I'm thinking, okay, and also do different people think differently? Of course they do, but are some people more rational thinkers and some people are more intuitive thinkers? But these are relevant questions to ask of the theory, but they're probably not limitations of the theory per se. So I think it's probably I understand that these aren't really limitations of the theory, so I'm going to mention it here in my essay. I think it's better to be honest with my examiner and say, look, I think these are good points, but they're not limitations of the theory. So it's and that way, if the examiner knows that these aren't really limitations of the theory, I can show them that, hey, I know that as well. If my examiner is persuaded and almost bamboozled by my fake limitations here, then me showing them that actually these aren't really limitations is me even giving more critical thinking, because they'll go, ah, yeah, right, actually, good point, I showed that. Okay. Now you might be noticing here I'm asking a lot of questions, so I've just asked 3 questions in a row. Is that okay? Well, I would say, you can see I'm kind of struggling to come up with limitations of the dual processing model. Why? Well, because I didn't prepare for this essay, guys. I just sat down and started to write this stuff off the top of my brain, and it's 6:34 in the morning, and so I don't have these pre-prepared notes to write, which is exactly what's going to happen in your exam. And also, questions are fine to ask. This is why I give you questions in the revision guide, because if you can't actually think of an answer to them, then just remember the questions and put them in your essay and you'll get somewhere. But it's perfectly fine, and that's exactly what critical thinking is asking these questions. I would argue, however, it's best if you also have the answers to those questions. Okay. Now, let me just look here. How am I doing for word count? Now, I would recommend, you obviously don't have the luxury of using a word count machine in your exams. So what do you do instead? Well, you probably want to remember, I'm going to guess that this is going to be, what am I going to guess? This is going to be about 823 words. Oh, 904. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's about as much as we want to write here, so I'm getting to the end. Now, you don't have a word count machine, so what you want to do, I would suggest, is use some IB exam papers before the exams, and then write, and then count the words that you write roughly per page. Don't ever spend time in an exam counting word by word by word. It's such a waste of time because the word count doesn't matter. But you want to get a general idea. I think it would be valuable to have a general idea of how much you write per one page, especially for your short answer questions. If you know you want to write about 300 to 400 words, then you know, okay, I want to aim to write about 3 pages. So if you only write a page, you're like, okay, I need something else to write here. Same thing, especially for the essays. Okay, you're going to be governed a lot by the time, how much time you have left, but also you want to be able to plan how much you're going to write. So if you get to, say, just writing one study and you've written already a page, you go, okay, I need to write 2 more pages. Anyway, it would just be good to have a rough idea of how many pages and also how much you can write in an hour. Some students might be able to write 800 words in an hour, and that will be true, right? Just slow handwriting, or you one of those people that your writing is beautiful and immaculate, but very neat, but it takes a longer time. So you need to make sure, okay, I can only do 800 words. So you need to then figure out, okay, how do I get my description, my evidence, my application, my limitations in 800 words? So you might have shorter summaries of studies to make sure you get everything in. Because if you only write 800 words and you spend 500 of those on studies, well, it's limiting how much critical thinking you can show. So it's important that you know how much you can write in the exam and then base your answers accordingly. Soon, this video, I hope, will be redundant and out of date because the exams will be online and you'll be able to type your answers. But until that time, we have to make do. All right, now let me see. Now, let me just finish this off with a brief conclusion. Okay. Okay, now I'm having a little dig here. This is my little pet peeve. My conclusion just does exactly what my introduction does. It kind of outlines the theory, fast and slow, talks about the studies, talks about the limitations, and that's it. Okay, because your introduction says this is what I'm going to write about, and your conclusion says this is what I just wrote about, and it should be about the topic, the studies, and the critical thinking, the counter arguments. And I just ended here by saying, but like, come on, bear with me here, right? They won the Nobel Prize for this super simple, fast and slow model of thinking. Do we really come up with some limitations? I wonder if, do I have my revision book here? Okay, now that I've finished writing, I wonder what limitations I could come up with. No, it's okay. I'll make another video maybe with some limitations of the dual processing model. Now let me just push. Okay, so now that was it. If you've watched to the end here, fantastic. I think I can see by my YouTube statistics that about 4% of you will get to this far, and 4% of IB psychology students get a 7 in IB Psych. So if you've watched to this, well done. Now let me grade this. Okay, now the 5 criteria. What would I give this essay? Okay, generally speaking, I would say criterion A, focus on the question. Yes, I would give that a 2 out of 2 because I've talked about the dual processing model throughout and I've linked everything back to the dual processing model. Now, knowledge and understanding, I would say that would be a 4, maybe a 5 for that. I think different examiners, right? That would be the range there. I think it's not like we read and mark and consider all the stuff the same. Now, my use of research, again, I would go a 4 to a 5. I only had 2 studies. I didn't have a third one. They were described. Results were there. There was an explanation. I think it would depend on the mood of your examiner. Critical thinking, I would say a 3 to a 4. I don't think I really made too many good evaluative points here. And my organization and clarity, yeah, I think I would get a 2 for that. So I think my answer would score anywhere with 4, 8, 10. I think between a 15 and an 18. And I think that's about right what this would deserve. Would have been better if I had done some more preparation, but off the top of my head at 5:45 a.m., maybe not bad, I would say. And also, this, you might be thinking, wait, Mr. Dixon, that's not very good, but that's enough to get a 7. So if you have your 3 short, imagine if I got 7 out of 9 for my 3 SAQs, right? That's 21. And then I get 15 for my essay. Imagine this would be the lowest score, right, possible, right? That's a 36 out of 45. Boom, there is my IB 7. Now, the point, what this also shows is the importance, I think, of the short answer question. It's really hard to write high scoring essays. Very difficult. And I would say, actually, one thing with the cognitive approach essays, there are fewer topics. So in that regard, it's easier. The biological approach is huge in topics compared to the cognitive and sociocultural. But the difficulty with the cognitive approach is almost half of the topics are theories and models. Multi-store model, schema theory, the model of decision making, the working memory model. And I think the theories and models essays are the hardest to write, again, for the point I've been making here, in my defense of my poor ability to evaluate this model. You are learning about these because they're really valid, and they've been around for a long time, and they win Nobel Prizes, and they've been here since the 50s and 60s and earlier. So it's pretty tricky to come up with limitations and critiques of these. That being said, I promise I'm now going to write the book, The Psychology of Learning for the Cognitive Approach, and I will put in some good tips and guides and critiques of this model that you can use in your essays. All right. I hope that was helpful, but if it wasn't, I mean, I'm writing these example essays anyway, so I kind of killed two birds with one stone. And well done for listening to all this. All right, bye.